As I was quietly waiting to come into the sacristy while Father Michael was celebrating the birth of new souls to grace with baptisms here, I quietly, as I got to the end of the office, looked at the graves, and I also looked up at the somewhat turbulent sky, and I thought, have you ever been in an aeroplane? There are certain moments in your flight in which your life is in the hands of one man, the pilot. You know that he knows what he's doing. You leave it to him. And so you take off and hope to land. And quite often on Irish planes there's a good round of applause when you do. Now, death is a bit like that. I noticed as we prepared the altar something which I hadn't noticed before. Look to the right of the altar. Look to that stained glass window. What do you see? A window is like an icon. An icon is written by an iconographer, and graphe means to write. One has therefore to read what he has written. Everything has a meaning and has to be unpacked. So too, all the windows in this church, which by the way are all stained glass, that's rather nice, it gives a magic light, doesn't it? All of them have to be understood. What do you see there? Towards the bottom, you have an explosion of light, and stained glass window is very good for capturing that. It's what we are celebrating right now. The unrolled tombstone. Now, to get back to my pilot, translate. The Lord calls himself the Good Shepherd. Go to the catacombs in Rome, and what do you find? Very early suggestions that this was understood in the context of Christian burial. The Good Shepherd carries the sheep on both shoulders and sees him safely home to the other side. This week, I thought I wanted to look at something which I had looked at a long time ago and which had greatly jogged me to think about this issue very seriously. This, my friends, is a modern version of a codex in medieval times or a book in our own. This is, once unpacked, a shot in the soul. And boy, did I get one when I saw it again. It's this. It was a gentleman who was very logical in his thought process, well educated, of university standing, and he had successfully cancelled God and the beyond from his vision. He had argued it out very well, and it made perfect sense that the soul was attached to the functioning of the brain, and therefore there was no independent existence once the material was no longer functioning. One day, with his dear wife, he was actually with students in Paris, even though he himself was American, and it was for a good academic reason. He was, that evening, having a moment of relax with his wife in a bar in the streets of Paris. And suddenly he felt an excruciating pain and fell to the ground. He couldn't bear it anymore. He was taken urgently to hospital. He was only given one morphine injection in the ambulance because that would otherwise interfere with anything they wanted to do in the hospital. In the hospital, they started to analyze what was wrong and copped on. It would need a major operation. But it was night, and there was no surgeon available in that hospital in Paris. He was with his wife, and they decided to say goodbye. He could not do it, as he put it, anymore. It was such excruciating pain that all he could do was yield to the growing slumber that he felt in his mind and limbs. And so they parted, embracing each other. He closed his eyes and what? It should have stopped there, shouldn't it? He'd cancel the right of anything else to be. It started, but he quite didn't understand. He started to see from where he was his wife, and so tried to speak to her, but she ignored him. He then saw where he had been lying, and he saw something which he classed as an inanimate object lying there, looking strangely like himself. But he still did not cop on. He was fully alive. He decided to address the word to the Frenchman in the bed next to him, who had been kind to him. And once again, your man looked straight through him. What's going on? Eventually he heard voices outside. Come along, we've been waiting for you. And so he thought it was the medical staff taking him to be operated. And so he went towards the door. But he had this slight hesitation to go further, because he saw that he was coming out of a light place and was going into a spooky dark one. He did not understand, but he felt compelled, and he had to follow these people. What happened then? They started to change mood. They started to be very aggressive. And eventually they started to be horribly aggressive and to treat him very badly and wanted him to join their game and change character. He realized he was in serious trouble. He couldn't do much about it. He had no force of will or of body. He had to follow. Eventually, they said this to him, "Come on, go along, go along, we're nearly there." And what did that mean? It was by now completely dark. At a certain point, he had some strange reaction. He actually heard a word. Pray. But I haven't prayed for donkeys yet. Pray. And he heard it 3 times. And he tried to scratch his non-existent brain to find what he knew in the way of prayer, going back to his adolescence and childhood. He rummaged for bits of the 23rd Psalm and the Our Father. Suddenly, he found that these horrible beings around him changed and didn't like it one little bit, and started to go away from him, leaving him still in complete darkness, but yet not with them. He didn't like the place one little bit. He called it the cesspit of the universe. He was messing up all eternity, and he could see it. Eventually, he felt some tiny blinker of light, and he looked, and it was a presence. This was the first spark of anything that he'd seen. He went instinctively towards it, but then it grew brighter. Eventually, he realized it was a presence and was pulling him in another direction. He went up and up, and he was still, as he put it, in space, and things started to happen. There were other beings coming into sight, angels and souls. Eventually, he was coming closer to that source of light which he perceived to be God, and the Son of God specifically. And things started to happen. He was shown episodes, one after another, from childhood on, things he'd quite forgotten, things he was ashamed of, but tiny bits which he was shown to be actually good. Acts of kindness to a handicapped person, that kind of thing. What mattered at that point. Eventually, coming back to the gospel of this day, he found that this supremely warm and good and light being started to do what? Because he was breaking down in tears of soul and true repentance and awareness, Christ started to hold him to his breast and stroke him on the back. And he realized it was true. He actually muttered on his way towards that light, "You're making a mistake. I shouldn't be here." And he heard this word coming back, "We don't make errors. You should be here." But he wasn't allowed to enter. He was to go back. And he was to say what he had seen. I think, because I didn't have time to see the whole of the video, that eventually he goes to consult a Jesuit. But Jesuits being Jesuits, they're very open-minded. So open-minded that he didn't cop on and didn't encourage him to become a Catholic. But he stayed with his tradition, which probably is what the Jesuit had said. And so he became a minister in his own tradition, which is why he speaks so well. I want, my friends, to leave you with this thought. I just take you back, as I do so, to when I was just ordained. It was this time of year. It was actually the 5th of April, after my ordination, I believe, that the prior said to me out of the blue, "Go and do a funeral." I haven't done a funeral ever. You just follow the book and I'll tell you what to do here. And so he told me what to do. So off I went to a beautiful church in the country, Castiglione d'Orcia. What happened? I realized that I was rather like that pilot, sending off a soul into the beyond. I still remember her name, actually. It was Jesuina, the female form of Jesus. Strange name to have in a Catholic country. And so we buried her. I didn't know a clue anything about her, but I presumed that she was a good Christian soul. But it hit me, my friends, when it comes to that point, what is anything else? And as I came back, I just wrote this, that what we are doing on this side of the tomb is written, chiseled in the stone, indelibly. We write eternity in the now. And one botch not corrected on this side of our last breath can mean all eternity in what that good man, Howard Storm, now Reverend Howard Storm, called the cesspit of the universe.